Hi there, glad you could join us and just to be part of our time of worship. We're looking at how to make amends and we're dipping into the story with Peter and Jesus just chatting on the shores of Galilee after the Easter story. And the first thing that we pick up here is we have to understand our limits. The last thing we need to do is to promise the earth when we can't keep our feet on the ground. That could be the same for relationships. Making sure we commit appropriately. If we're starting work at a new contract, you've got to be full on. Or even buying stuff for a new hobby, you don't want to just start forking out a lot of money for something that you'll be half-heartedly interested in. Peter was like that with jumping in feet first. He was Mr. Spontaneity when it comes to these things, saying he would die for Jesus when instead actually he would deny Jesus. Jesus knew Peter really had a good heart, but he had to sharpen Peter's mind and grit to stay with the task in hand. And Jesus didn't dampen his enthusiasm. He just wanted to make sure he could channel it in a way that for Jesus would reflect back to Peter and wake up to the real thought of who he was. Yes, it's great to have a good heart for something, but it also needs a strong, clear mind that can take things further. And that's what happened to Peter. He became a key leader in the church. He took the message to the heart of the hostile empire that they were part of, and he eventually died for his faith. Now, Jesus helped Peter realize that his impulsive claims to love and service and devotion did not match up to his actions. And from now on, from this conversation, the actions were to do the talking through those caring actions. And it's not easy, as we read in the story where Peter, he actually did feel hurt, discovering the truth about himself. It also reminds us that discovering the truth about ourselves can be a hard process. But with Jesus, it is to change and transform us, not to drag us down and to make us feel miserable, but more that we in our spiritual life begin to see how God sees us. You see, Jesus sees more, he knows more, he understands more, he believes us in us more. You may have had times previously of being more enthusiastic about your faith, just like Peter, but we've allowed choices to trip us up. Maybe it's time to have a good look at ourselves. And not as how we see ourselves or even how others see us, but how God sees us. He will see the good that can be born in us if we allow God to shape who we are and what he's called us to do. And sometimes when we take a good look at ourselves, we can be terribly harsh. So much so that we can't get over ourselves. And that's where we need to take ourselves less seriously and take others much more seriously. Maybe we're responsible for others and they're dependent on our leadership. It could be that it's in the home where we need to take the lead in helping others and help them to be developed in a way that sees a better way forward. Think of our own grandchildren, the chance that we could give from our wisdom and experience so that in the future they can avoid the mistakes maybe we fell into. Or even into our elder years, let us not give up on being leadership material. These are times where we need to show that leadership, helping others to live well and choose well because we have chosen to finish well. You see, the conversation Jesus had with Peter was his last earthly conversation was in the shores of this lakeside Galilee. And he needed to shape this follower, Peter, so that it could shape the direction of the church. Leadership is taking others seriously, and this is the way to make amends. And we need to look to Jesus, not to others, also to make amends. You see, making amends can only be measured against Jesus himself. Otherwise, comparing ourselves to others will not learn and grow in the areas that we should. We only short-circuit the process when we compare ourselves to others, whether that's our friends or our family, or even someone that we look up to. We need to make sure that we look to Jesus and nothing less. Peter was tempted to ask what was happening to John. He was walking behind them while having a conversation, and he obviously compared himself to him. But they were going on different paths, and that couldn't be compared. And that's the problem with Peter. He stepped out the boat to walk on water, but then looked at the waves and his faith wavered. Our faith will waver if we do not fix our eyes on Jesus and what he stands for. And maybe like Peter, we have been looking to other people not for inspiration, but to see if we're keeping up or keeping ahead. And it's a silly game to play because we have different paths, different starting points, different personalities, different energies, different abilities. However, the gift that all of us have is that over and above anyone else, we are unique. There's no one else like you. And Peter had a task given to him. That task could be for us, it could be anything. Maybe it's the way we deal with problems that we face in the home. So instead of a harsh word, it will be a kind word. Instead of shirking responsibility, we will commit to it. Or maybe a message of comfort needs to be sent to the reassuring words in a card. Or maybe a word of encouragement, maybe to another person in the church. The best way to be empowered is not to look to others and to say to yourself, well, they're not doing that, why should I bother? Rather, we should look to Jesus and be reminding ourselves of what Jesus would do and be called to do the same. That's where the difference begins to happen. The other thing to make amends is that we need to face up to the future. And that doesn't mean that everything will be fine and that it's a guarantee for making a decision worthwhile. Sorting out problems doesn't mean that other problems won't crop up. The decision to move forward needs to be unconditional and measured in its own right. Jesus laid it out for Peter that he had a tough shift ahead. He could go through something that would make some people just want to give up. The nature of Peter's death was not a promising future. It was a sharp reminder that even in our faith, it's not a call to sweetness and light, but at times a conviction that needs to be stuck with in the face of adversity. We need to remind ourselves who Jesus was speaking to in this story. It was Peter. Now, if we spoke to others who were not like Peter, they may just curl up and go away and hide in a corner. But folks who are like this particular person, Peter, needs to be approached differently. And likewise, for anyone who's not like Peter, needs to be approached differently too. So what we're seeing here is, in our story, is a wake-up call to someone who's probably pretty much like a romantic, whose head's in the clouds, who sees the big picture but fails and trips over on the details that need to be sorted out. Those folk need an approach that says, if you're going to move forward, you need to know what's in front of you. If you're going to stick with it like you say you're going to do, here is what is ahead. So we'll need to face up to the future, but each of us need to handle that differently. And the way we look at it, so it doesn't stop us moving forward in our faith. So, in making amends, here's some things to take away for today. It's good to know our limits, but that does not mean we are limited by them, because God sees everything about us and he still believes in us. Let's take Jesus' example and empower others by saying to them that God can see in them a way forward for them to grow and develop, giving them hope and reassurance. Another way is to stop comparing ourselves to others. It won't help. Focus on Jesus. Do what he would do to spur you on. Then last of all, let's face up to the future, whatever it may bring. We need to look at it in the right way and not see it as a condition of how we move forward, but see it because we know God will be with us and that we will face it wisely and resolutely. And like Peter, make an impact that we never imagined we would do, but we do it with Jesus working through us. Take care, and it's good you joined us today. God bless.